So today we are holding the second meeting within the framework of the series of seminars Contemporary Area Studies, the project of School of International Regional Studies of the Faculty of World Economy and International Affairs of HEC University. Our guest today is Dr. Waqar Rizvi, Pakistani-Canadian broadcast journalist, TV presenter and political analyst. Let me thank you to be with us and accepting our invitation to discuss these crucial topics, the COVID-19 in Pakistan, domestic and foreign priorities. Also today online with us, our Dean Professor Sergei Karaganov, and I'd like to give him the floor for welcoming speech, please, Dr. Karaganov.
No, I'm not here to give a speech, but rather to listen. So thank you for coming, for joining us. But I'm just a passerby.
Okay.
I got your email, Murad, and decided to try to join because the view from Pakistan on the whole matter, be that COVID or other issues, is relatively rare. So I was interested in looking at the world from the Pakistani angle. So I'm here to listen. A specialist, of course, on epidemics, though everybody now is especially on epidemics and pandemics. I think that, generally speaking, I mean, this pandemic is a way for many elites to avoid, I mean, other burning issues, including probably in Pakistan, I don't know, which have been, I mean, building up. But the pandemic is serious enough. So I'm looking forward for this conversation because the view from Pakistan is very, very heard here. Thank you for coming.
Thank you so much, Professor Karaganov. It's a great pleasure for us, and thank you for your support. So also with us today, Dr. Vera Vishnikova, the head of the School of International Regional Studies of the Faculty of World Economy and International Affairs of HEC University. Dr. Vishnikova, the floor is yours. Welcome, please.
Yes, thank you, dear Dr. Waqar Rizvi, dear colleagues, friends, and guests of our seminar. First, I would like to thank you to each and every one of you for joining us today. Before we get started, I would like to express my sincere appreciation to Dr. Waqar Rizvi, who generously agreed to take part in this seminar to explain the real situation in Pakistan. Nowadays, in the period of turbulence associated with coronavirus pandemic, when countries close their borders and when sovereign interests have become the main aim, globalization has received a huge ideological blow. It may not recover, I think. That's why the area studies as a science acquired a special importance. In this regard, the School of International Regional Studies of Faculty of World Economy and International Affairs begins a series of expert seminars where area studies are the central vector. South Asia studies, especially the increasing role of such countries as Pakistan, is the focus of the research interest of our school. The agreement between the University of Lahore and our university, which was signed last November, to prove it. We could say that Pakistan is not a well-known country for ordinary people in Russia. Lack of information in the mass media about Pakistan generates remorse about the real situation, which is related with coronavirus. As experts, we would like to know the real facts, the opinions, estimations of the contemporary situation. We know that Pakistan and other countries of South Asia remained in difficult circumstances by spreading of coronavirus. We would like to hear from you some information on several, and we prepared several questions. That's why I think that this seminar would be very interesting for us because it would make in such Q&A session. Okay, thank you very much. And I give the floor to our moderator, Murat. Murat, you're welcome.
Thank you so much, Vera Vladimirovna. Now let's start with our first speech to Dr. Rizvi. Please, your welcome speech. And after that, we will continue with our question as we agreed before.
Sure. Sure. Thank you very much, Murad, and thank you to HSE University and our other esteemed colleagues as well who are on this meeting as well. I appreciate your invitation, of course. It's very kind of you to call me. I just wanted to clarify one thing. I'm not Dr. Rizvi. I'm just, you can just call me Waqar. You can just call me Waqar by first name. I like it to be casual and conversational. You know, it's important, as you said, the Pakistani point of view is something that is not spoken about a lot in the world. You're right about that. Unfortunately, Pakistan seems to be one of those countries that's overlooked, and that happens, of course, with many countries that are not seen as traditional superpowers in the world. But of course, this is a very important country. We have a very large population. We have 200 million plus people in this country. And coronavirus or any pandemic or any global events affects us as well, especially because we are so dependent on the rest of the world also. As one of the other speakers already mentioned, we are in a globalized world, but right now we're having borders closed. And that is affecting, of course, Pakistan also and Pakistanis. Pakistanis, as you know, such as myself, I'm a Pakistani Canadian, so I've never grown up here, but now that I'm living in my own country, you know, I have this connection, but if I want to leave the country now, it'll be a lot more difficult within this coronavirus context, right? That's not, of course, the only important thing. As you may know, Pakistan is a developing country at this point. So it's not, it does not have a very strong economy completely independently. It depends on other countries to keep its economic engine going. And that's a very vital part of this entire coronavirus equation as well for the country at this point, because we need to look at how these external factors affect the internal situation within Pakistan as well, and vice versa. Because as I said, we are 200 million people. So there are a lot of Pakistanis, and whether we like it or not, that affects the rest of the world as well as our own people also.
Thank you so much. So now let's start with our first question. The first question is about what are the most important considerations for Pakistan as it battles coronavirus?
So one of the first ones I already alluded to in my introduction, that is the fact that we are a very large population in context of the fact that our land size is smaller than, for example, a country like India or some other country around the world. We have 200 million plus people. In certain parts of the country, it's very congested. So as you can imagine, social distancing, as we're told during coronavirus, is sometimes very hard to do. One of the bigger considerations within that as well is that our infrastructure, our medical infrastructure is a bit weak, is actually quite weak, I should say. And this is something that even the Prime Minister of the country would openly admit. So we cannot at this point in time completely say, okay, we're going to cut everybody off and we can do social distancing the way it might be understood in other countries. But for some people, they may simply not be able to afford that, because we also have a very large portion of the population which lives under the poverty line or close to the poverty line. And then there is also on top of that, a very large number of people who are illiterate and who cannot read and write, for example. So these are daily wage earners. How does one deal with daily wage earners then in such a situation where you are told by the rest of the world, okay, you have to essentially shut down so you can stop this virus from spreading? So as Prime Minister Imran Khan has said of Pakistan, he has said that he cannot lock down the country. He cannot enforce a curfew, for example, because he knows that for daily wage earners, it would be like suicide for them, right? Because they won't have food to eat then on their tables, because literally the money that they make on a daily basis is exactly what they take home to their families to be able to eat dinner or lunch or breakfast the next day. And sometimes even then they're only having one meal in a day. So in this sort of economic situation, then you need to make very tough decisions. For example, where I'm sitting in Lahore, there is a lockdown, but not a curfew. So you can still go out, you can still go to the pharmacy, to the grocery store. You can order food sometimes from certain restaurants. In certain areas, they will deliver, but there cannot be a curfew. Most of the stores will close at 8 p.m., for example. But again, the daily wage earners even now are already suffering. So when you go out into the city, you can see some poor people who are almost just sitting around and they're sort of unsure of exactly what to do now, how to make money now. So the government just last night and a couple of nights ago as well has announced a couple of economic measures to support such people specifically. They will be giving them cash handouts and support throughout this period. Right now, we are in a lockdown mode till April 4th at least. And then even after that, the government will see what will happen after that date. But right now, we are in this lockdown period. And as I said, the biggest people who are being affected right now are the daily wage earners. And that is basically the most important thing right now. On top of the fact that I should also mention the weak medical infrastructure. And when we're talking about weak medical infrastructure, that means basic things like government-run hospitals versus private hospitals. And I'll talk about that later on as well, a bit in detail. But the most basic thing, as we know, when it comes to coronavirus or any other disease, is testing capabilities. You need the abilities, you need the test kits to be able to even test these people. Right now, we don't have enough test kits in the country. So right now, you have to be very selective about who exactly you will be able to test to be able to see if they have coronavirus or not. So for example, as we're speaking right now, the number of infected people in Pakistan officially is 1,800 approximately, and there have been approximately 25 deaths. Now, we can believe that number or not believe that number. I don't have an opinion on that, but because we have not done widespread testing, like for example, South Korea, as you know, in South Korea, they've done testing pretty much of as many people as they could. And that is why they were able to control the situation. In Pakistan, we don't have that capability right now. So all we can do is we need to choose then the people who are showing the symptoms according to our doctors and medical experts and test them. At the same time, as I said, the Prime Minister and the government is trying to do the best they can within the infrastructure and capabilities that we have.
So thank you so much. You have already outlined the part of our second question. It's about challenges does the country face at this time. And I want to ask, are these unique to Pakistan?
You know, there are certain things which are unique to Pakistan. So let me talk about one of the sensitive topics in Pakistan, which is, again, a statistic came out today that 45% of the people who have coronavirus right now in Pakistan, as we're speaking right now, are people who came back from Iran. So these were people who were on pilgrimage in Iran, at religious sites in Iran. And when they came back into the country, there is some debate on whether or not their quarantine conditions were good or not. I don't have an opinion on that. I've seen pictures of very nice quarantine and I've seen pictures of very bad quarantines. It's hard to know what is the exact truth, but there is some debate about that topic, whether or not the quarantine conditions for these people at the border between Iran and Pakistan was good or not. But what this does is, because if you look at the history of Pakistan, especially contemporary history, there has been sectarian violence in the country, especially between Shia and Sunnis, right? So this issue then sometimes becomes sectarian. And online, on social media, for example, there have been certain people, even on TV, I would say, who have been trying to misuse this situation because these were pilgrims who returned from Iran and brought the coronavirus with them. There's certain people trying to misuse that situation and trying to, I wouldn't say they're doing it on purpose, create sectarian tensions, but it is happening. And there are many people who are trying to, of course, talk against that, saying that this is not a good thing. We should remain united at this time, regardless of what sect or religion we are, as long as we are all Pakistani citizens. Another thing to mention, and I alluded to this in my earlier answers, is classism. So it's the gap between rich and poor. So you have government hospitals and you have private hospitals. Again, we are a very large population, but of course the rich live in very large houses. So they have the ability to be able to do social distancing and they can remain away from people, right? The poor don't have such luxuries, right? And the same thing goes to then hospitals, the kind of medical care that they can get. So there's a huge imbalance about how the rich and the poor can be tested as well as be treated if they have coronavirus or even any other virus or disease, right? This is not unique to Pakistan. I think these are one of those things which is common in many parts of the world, right? You can even talk about the Western countries possibly. I mean, a rich person can easily go and pay a lot of money to get tested because, you know, he or she can afford that kind of money. But somebody in America who, for example, works at McDonald's probably cannot afford to do that sort of thing, right? Beyond that, then we also have then, you know, how the government exactly, the different governments in the country are reacting to this. So we have the federal government, which would be under Prime Minister Imran Khan, how he is reacting versus then the provincial governments. So we have, for example, where I'm sitting right now is in Punjab province. So our provincial governor has put in certain measures which are different from the federal government. Now, there's also an argument here because certain of the federal governors, or provincial governors, I should say, sorry, are from a different party as Imran Khan. So then there's also this issue of internal politics, right? There's also this internal argument between who is right and who is wrong. And some people just don't like Imran Khan because of the party he's from. And people from Imran Khan's party don't like somebody else because he's from a different party. So there's sort of that internal politics that is playing out as well. And in the middle of this, then it's a distraction, right? Because technically the country should be uniting and not fighting amongst themselves or arguing about every single detail. And they should be agreeing, whatever party they're from, about how exactly to defeat this virus. So that, again, I think is something which is not unique to Pakistan, also because, again, we know that in other parts of the world, for example, again, I'm going to use America because it's an easy example, but you have Democrats versus Republicans. And as you know, there are many people who are criticizing Donald Trump. And at the same time, Donald Trump is criticizing Democrats. So, it's a whole bunch of partisan politics as well. One of the main things, though, which is a challenge, which again is not unique to anywhere in the world or Pakistan, is the fact that you need to convince people as well that this is a serious thing. Because there are a lot of people, and I was, reading news reports, and I've reported on this myself as well as a journalist, that in Paris people were out, picnicking, and in London people were out sunbathing. And I know in America there's certain places where people are still taking their children to the parks. They're acting like nothing is happening in life. It's not a big deal for them. To try to convince people overall that this is an extremely serious virus and everyone should take it seriously and stay home as much as possible, clean their hands, sanitize their hands, that is very difficult. Now, of course, one of the unique challenges in Pakistan, again, repeating myself from one of the previous points, is poverty. It's very hard to convince poor or illiterate people that this is very serious, because for them, their only worry is for them to be able to have food on their tables, to feed their families and to feed themselves. So that sort of thing, I mean, it's happening now in Pakistan on media, which is, again, I'm sure it's the same situation in Russia or in any other country where media is also playing a role in trying to convince people, okay, you need to do these following things to keep you and your family safe. So I think some of those things, like I said, are unique, but some of them are quite common to any country in the world.
So thank you so much. You gratefully highlighted the domestic issues. Now it's time to return. How has the virus played out in Pakistani's foreign policies?
Yeah, so I mentioned Iran, and there's another aspect of Iran-Pakistan relations, right? The relations are not always good. There are tensions sometimes between the two countries, but this time around, as you know, Iran is under sanctions, US sanctions, as well as other sanctions from around the world, ever since the US walked away from the nuclear deal. So Pakistan made a statement and said the US and the UN should lift sanctions from Iran so that it can defeat coronavirus. Now, that's a very important thing because it's not a popular thing for Pakistan to say. As you know, Pakistan has many different friendships and allies in the region, and some of them might not be happy with Pakistan saying something like that. But if you look at Pakistan's national interest, it's important for it to say something like that because, firstly, Iran is a very important neighbor. They share a very large border, a border which is porous and it's not possible to police the entire border. So there's a lot of people who go back and forth between Iran and Pakistan on certain areas of the border. So it's in Pakistan's national interest for Iran to be able to defeat the coronavirus as well, so the coronavirus does not come into Pakistan. Because I already mentioned earlier, pilgrims, some of them at least, brought the coronavirus into Pakistan, right? So that's one very big issue. Second, of course, is China. China is an extremely important partner of Pakistan. It shares an extremely important border with that country, and of course, a very close economic relations with China. And that is very key because, as you know, the Belt and Road Initiative, Pakistan is part of that. CPEC, the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, that's also very important. So China has been helping Pakistan quite a bit. It has sent supplies, medical supplies and otherwise as well to Pakistan to try to, so that the country can defeat this virus. But that's also an extremely important aspect about how Pakistan has acted towards coronavirus from day one. Because there was a huge argument in the country about stopping flights to China completely at the beginning. And Pakistan said, we can't do that. Firstly, because there are a lot of Pakistani students who are studying in China. And secondly, it was very important to keep some of those flights open, again, for these economic and friendly diplomatic relations between the two countries. Now, whether that was the right move or the wrong move, that is, of course, something that is being debated in the country, just like the Iran issue. But that's nevertheless what the situation is right now. Now, as the final point on foreign policy, Pakistan, I'm going to repeat myself, is a developing country. So Pakistan does need international help. Pakistan cannot defeat the virus completely alone. So just today, the United Nations announced that there would be a fund set up for developing countries to be able to defeat the coronavirus. I believe it was close to $1 trillion or more. And Pakistan would need some of that money as well to be able to help it defeat this virus. It needs international help. It needs the United Nations. It needs the WHO and other such organizations' help to be able to defeat the virus.
So thank you so much. And relevant with some international relations, I want to ask this question. As you know, Russian Federation has already provided some medical and humanitarian assistance to Italy, to Syria, if I'm not mistaken, to Serbia also, and today at morning to the United States after the call between President Trump and President Vladimir Putin. So what do you think? Is it possible maybe Pakistan will request Russia to help, or is there any news about this, maybe any information?
I haven't heard any news about that specifically, but I'm sure if the Pakistani foreign minister or others listen to this interview, for example, they might do that because, you know, as I said, Pakistan needs the help, and Pakistan-Russia relations are pretty good right now. I know that. I've met the foreign minister of Pakistan a few times, and he's mentioned Russia in very positive terms. So I think that for sure, if Pakistan knows that there is an offer from Russia and an availability of help from Russia, I'm sure that they would reach out to Russia to ask it for help. And of course, these sorts of things, as you know, at such times are always good for diplomatic relations, cultural relations, etc.
So thank you. And my last question, after that we can transfer to another. We talked about that the world are so globalized, and there are, even in case of Pakistan, it's mutual dependency. So after the pandemic, after coronavirus, how will the world start to act? I mean, it will be some process of deglobalization, trying to, how to say, provide more sustainable development for country, even in fact that, for example, in the future we can meet again with some catastrophe which will have some global impact. How Pakistan will change their policy maybe in future?
I think one of the things that I didn't get to mention, in fact, is that Pakistan is also trying to tap into its youth, right? So I'm talking about internal right now. I think Pakistan and every country in the world has realized that, yes, you can ask for help from other countries if you need it, but that help might not always be available, right? Because every country has its own national interests. So, for example, Russia needs to take care of Russians first and then take care of anybody else around the world. That's just normal and logical, right? So Pakistan cannot always depend on somebody else for help. It needs to figure out things on its own. And right now, Pakistan is trying to use its youth and its young people who have been educated both outside the country and within the country, and who are very, very, savvy when it comes to technology and data. And they're trying to gather this sort of data. I know people who are involved with the Punjab government, for example, who are trying to give the Punjab government accurate data about coronavirus within this province. And they're trying to figure out ways of how to defeat it then using that data, right? Because data, as you know, is extremely important in such cases. Then there are young people who are carrying out charity work as well. So I think the realization is slowly. It may not happen 100%. I don't think it's ever possible to do everything alone 100%. But I think a country like Pakistan is realizing that it needs to start thinking independently as well, to figure out that if something like this happens in the future again, it has better resources within the country and has more people trained within the country to try to deal with this sort of situation.
So thank you so much, Mr. Bakar. Now we turn to question and answer session. Professor Sergei Karaganov, maybe you have some comments on the question.
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Vakar. That has been a very interesting presentation, and I see the situation now in your country from many angles. It is becoming tri-dimensional rather than one-dimensional, which we get sometimes from the news. But my question is a bit it is still from another angle. I mean, you are, of course, Pakistan and India are different countries, and we know all of the differences. But India is more or less on the same level of development, probably developing faster. And it's still is a very poor country with a lot of poor population. Nevertheless, they opted for a complete lockdown. First, do you think that India would withstand that? Second, don't you think that Indians have good reasons for a complete lockdown? And the Pakistani government, for whatever reasons, is not closing the country because it could not afford. But maybe that is an open invitation for disaster. All the more that we all know that Pakistani workers, waiters, and a lot of other people are working all over the world, and they are returning back home. As far as I understand, now they should return home because they are not welcomed in the countries where they work. But we, I mean, traveling around the world, see many Pakistani invited workers. I mean, how could that work? I mean, in the medium term.
On the point of India, I think it's a mixed bag. So just today I was reading a report, and I found a report about how Indian workers are, in fact, they're having a very hard time. The wage earners, those who are poor, because they've been kicked out of their jobs, and they're now trying to go back to their original villages and towns, but they're being blocked from even doing that. So some of them, because India is a very large country, as you know, even in land mass. So they're trying to return from, main cities like Delhi or Mumbai or these other cities, and they're trying to go back. And they're having a very hard time even being allowed to go back because the lockdown is so strict that each province's borders have been locked down as well. So these poor people are on the roads and they have nowhere to go, and they don't have food, and they don't have basic supplies. And so you have these huge groups of poor people in India right now who are sleeping on streets in different parts of India as they're trying to get back to their villages. So I think it was the way it was done in India, possibly, and you can argue for the good side as well, of course, that it was an important decision to make to try to control coronavirus. I'm not arguing against that. But at the same time, you need to balance it with your own citizens' needs, right? So if you have a whole bunch of poor people who are on the streets, then that also is not good for your citizens, right? So there were also videos of health workers and workers on the streets disinfecting and spraying disinfectant on top of these people. So, again, the treatment of the poor, again, was not very good in India. In Pakistan, at least, where it was more of a balanced approach, one can argue, and I'm sure there are negatives as well, which you can find, but in the more balanced approach where there is still a lockdown, like when I go outside now, I don't see many people out in the streets because most businesses, like normal private companies, have been told to shut down, and they have shut down. Only my channel, for example, because a media organization, is still open, and government offices, basic ones, very important ones, some of them are still open. Banks mostly are closed. Only 1 or 2 branches are open throughout the city. Restaurants are open, pharmacies, grocery stores, and fruit stores, etc. So as in the lockdown is partial and quite significant, but at the same time, it was done in a fashion where the wage earners were not forgotten. So there was an economic plan to support them immediately. What happened in India was the Prime Minister announced it and said, after a couple of hours, there will be a lockdown for 21 days. So people started rushing to the grocery stores and started saying, oh my God, what are we going to do? And then these wage earners started losing their jobs. And so it created this domino effect, right? And again, I'm sure we can find positive and negatives in both these situations, but that's on the point of India. Now, as far as Pakistani workers outside the country goes, it's both ways. So there are some Pakistanis who are still being able to remain in the countries that they're working in. It's not everybody or not most of them, I think, who want to come back, because some of them are okay in whatever countries they're working in. Some of them, yes, have been requesting to come back. So, and they've had a hard time, some of them. So for example, there was a group who I believe came back to Pakistan via Qatar. And they had a very hard time because by that time, Qatar had also already stopped its flights to Pakistan, though Qatar Airways I'm talking about. So they had to figure out another way. The Pakistani government had to get involved, and they had to then essentially, you know, bring them back to, repatriate them back to the country on a special flight. So those things are also, yes, a challenge for the country, because again, it's not like we have, you know, a very large airline or something so that we can go send our planes around the world to pick up these people. We have limited planes as well. And we're trying to, like I said, control the coronavirus spread within the country also.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for your question, Professor Kurganov. Now I think Dr. Vera Yushnikova has
I have a question.
Yeah.
Yes, I have a question connected with the role of China. You said that the China is playing a big role, yes, in the economy of Pakistan, and make a lot of support, yes, and supporting Pakistan. But the new reality has come, and the world has changed a lot, and it is in the process of changing. And how does the Pakistan government see the future role of China as the economic leader in the Pakistan area? I mean, will China save its priorities, or such countries as Saudi Arabia and the USA will have more power after the corona pandemic?
To be very honest, I think on the issue of China, because Prime Minister Imran Khan, the current government prioritizes relations with China very heavily. And I have not seen any signs that that is going to change. That does not mean, as you said, of course, the relations with America are also very important. The relations with Saudi Arabia are also very, very important for the country. So those relations, I do not think will change. And again, because it is a give and take relationship, right? So Pakistan needs the aid, for example, that some of these countries provide the country, be it military aid or otherwise, or just humanitarian aid in some levels, or just economic relations. So for example, with China, as I mentioned, CPEC is very important for Pakistan, the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, the development that China is being able to help Pakistan with. Of course, there are debates in the country about whether this is good or bad. It's very complicated and very deep debates. I don't want to go into that, but nevertheless, China is very important. And so I don't think that the relations with China, with America, with Saudi Arabia, or even Iran will change very drastically, even after, where it wants good relations with as many countries, of course, as it can. And all of these countries that you've mentioned are very important allies and friends of Pakistan.
Okay, thank you. Yes, and I have one more question about the situation in the Pakistan. And I have heard from the news that the fast spreading of the coronavirus has become the cause of some close the masks. There are no official decision about it. Some masks are closed and some are still opened. How can you comment this situation in the case that the Russian Patriarch official recommended to stay at home to all people?
No, this is a very sensitive issue. Of course, as you know, Pakistan is a Muslim country, and for many Pakistanis, their religion and faith are very, very important to them, and it's very sensitive for them. Especially Friday prayers are extremely important, those gatherings. But what the government did is that, of course, at the beginning, some provincial governors said that they would not close the mosques at all. And even now, there is not talk about closing mosques, but there is talk of limiting how many people will be allowed into mosques. So the different numbers in different provinces. And now there have been meetings with religious leaders and officials throughout the country. So provincial officials as well as federal officials have met people from both Sunni and Shia and even Christian and other groups as well. and have told them, listen, you need to convince your followers and the people of your faith not to come out because it's for their own good. So I think that this is one of those things, because it's so sensitive, that the government cannot just give an order. It's one of those things where it has to, like you said, in Russia, the patriarch himself said, let's stay home and let's worship from home. So I think this has to come from the religious leaders themselves. It cannot come from an official, because if it comes from an official, then sometimes it seems like it's an attack on somebody, you know what I mean? An attack on somebody's faith. So as I said, because this is a very sensitive issue, it needs to be handled in a very sensitive fashion.
Okay, thank you. It was very interesting.
So thank you for your question, Professor Vojvodina. Now, dear colleagues, if you have some questions, you can ask them, as I said, using chat, live chat room, or maybe function, raise hand function. So if not, I think we can wait a little bit. No. So in this case, it's time maybe to sum up, because it's about maybe 40 minutes. So first of all, Mr. Rizvi, thank you so much for accepting our invitation and for a comprehensive answer to all questions. So we should outline that this is our second meetings. Before it was meetings with Dr. Imad Rizk from Lebanon, and he also, like you, outlined some crucial and, how to say, general trends. First of all, in my opinion, it's relevant about the unity in international affairs, especially in war. We should understand that it's time for humanity to understand that there are some global issues, global challenges, which can be resolved only working together. And you also today outlined that, of course, Pakistan is still, how to say, strong enough, but without any international support, aids, it can't resolve challenges this situation. And in my opinion, as also outlined in the opinion of Dr. Imaz, Middle East countries, and not only Middle East countries, but whole world today needs some, how to say, international unity and solidarity.
Especially Iran, yes?
Yeah, especially Iran, because
Yes.
it's also our neighbor states, and as you said, is also affected so much to Pakistan, and not only in some political issues or confessional issues, but also now with the situation of coronavirus. I want to thank you one more time and hope that we will continue our fruitful cooperation. So, and dear colleagues, we are waiting you soon. Tomorrow, with our next speakers, also from Pakistan. We will discuss the situation with Chinese economy, with Chinese position in international affairs, and Afghanistan peace process during the corona. Yes, no, it's a little bit more about peace process during the coronavirus world. So thank you so much. See you soon.
Thank you.
Thank you very much,
Thank you.
Vakarizi, doctor. Yes, nice.
Thank you. It's very nice
Thank you.
meeting you all.
Thank you.
So much.
Thank
you very much.
Bye.
Goodbye.
Thank you.